네, 안녕하세요. Hi guys. Hi. How you doing? Good? Good. Good. I'm good. Thank you. 제가 9살 때 와서 한국말이 많이 서툴어요. 그래서 여기 부모님들 많이 계시는데 제가 한국말 좀 더 잘했으면은 얘기를 좀 더 잘 들을 수 있었으면 좋겠는데 제가 일단 최선을 다 해보고요. 영어로도 많이 섞여서 얘기를 드릴게요. 제 이름 김나현, 한국 이름은 김나현이고요. I also go by Angie. My name is Angie Kim. I'm an immigrant, very proud immigrant. I came to the States when I was 9 years old with my family. And I know there's some familiar faces who've probably heard my story one too many times. But bear with me. I have a younger brother and both of my parents, we arrived in Woodside in New York in the summer of '93. I didn't speak a word of English when I got here. At the time, they didn't teach English at school, at grade school. So it was a big cultural shock for me and my brother. My dad had some family here. Both of his parents were U.S. citizens. 저희 아버님, 부모님, 할머니, 할아버지분께서 이제 시민권자였어요. 여기. 그래서 my dad tried to adjust our status, but we have a very broken immigration system in the country. So my family submitted a green card application when I was about 16 years old, 17 years old. My grandmother was the sponsor. 저희 할머니가 스폰서 해주셔서 제가 한 17살 때 영주권 신청에 들어갔는데요. My grandmother passed away about a year later into the process. So we lost that case. My parents separated after, and my father remarried a U.S. citizen who was a Korean immigrant. 그래서 저희 아버지가 제 경우로 영주권을 다시 신청하셨고요. When my dad reapplied for his green card through his marriage, the day that he submitted the application, it was 10 days after I turned 21. 그래서 저희 아버지가 신청 들어간 날짜가 이제 제가 21살 넘은 지 한 열흘 된 날. So now I live with what we call the mixed status family. So my brother, who benefited from my father's marriage, and my father received a green card. Me and my mother remained undocumented. My brother naturalized after 5 years, became a naturalized citizen, and then soon after he sponsored for my mother. So now my mother is a permanent resident. So what that means is I'm currently the sole undocumented member in my family after 25 years. So that's tough. That's tough, not only on me, but it's also tough on my family, for my mom. 저희 부모님들 아시다시피 지금 이제 저희 어머니는 영주권자시고요. 그다음에 제 동생, 남동생은 시민권자예요. 그래서 생각하시다시피 많이 저희 어머니도 힘들죠. 저를 바라보는 이제 눈빛이 항상 무겁고 언제든지 저한테 영주권을 주실 수 있다 하시면은 주시고 싶겠죠, 저희 어머니도. So that's where I am. I received my DACA when I was 29. in 2012. So I almost didn't make it, right? Because back in 2012, they had an age cap, which was at 30. But I got lucky, so. And really the reason why I'm standing here is because, because of DACA, really. DACA did a lot more than give me the ability to work. It opened my eyes and taught me that there's a lot more to be done for our undocumented immigrants and the community. So I was told to keep my speech relatively sweet and short this time, so I just want to talk about one thing. So I recently had the privilege of meeting a civil rights veteran who goes by the name Curtis Muhammad. He's a very, very cool old black man who fought alongside, someone like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Jackson and Malcolm X. But I was lucky enough to meet him recently. I sat right next to him and I listened to his words like they were like honey dripping off his lips, and it completely changed my life. But he taught me many things, but among the one things that he taught me was what it really means to persevere. Right? Because what we're fighting for right now, when we talk about civil rights, right? When we talk about immigrant rights, we're not just talking about a reform to an immigration policy. What we're talking about is we are challenging what it means to be an immigrant. We're challenging what is human rights. And that's what he taught me. He redefined what I was doing. So my job isn't to advocate for immigration reform, per se. My job is to challenge what it means to be an immigrant. My job is to challenge the system that oppresses people because they lack documentation. Just like Mr. Muhammad did in his time. So I want you guys to really think about that. Because even if we had immigration reform now, even if the DREAM Act passed, would we have justice is the question. Would we be living in a world where every single person is respected with dignity and their God-given right to pursue happiness? So that's the question. So I've been thinking about a lot about that lately. Why am I here? What am I doing? What am I fighting for? Why am I going to DC? And why do I come to churches like this? And why do I share my story? And I'm still searching for what that answer is. But one thing I do know is that I'm not looking for a solution. What I'm looking for is true justice, so that everybody can be free, so that everybody can be happy, because that's what we want, right? So there's something I really want to share with everyone. I initially had invited a friend dreamer of mine who unfortunately couldn't make it today, but he wrote this poem that just blew me away. He's also a former dreamer and a former undocumented Korean friend, and he wrote a poem about his father. So if you can just bear with me and allow me to share this poem with everyone on his behalf. 밥 먹나? Did you eat? She told me she would come back while packing her bags. Her promise as empty as the void that she left that night. The planes roared louder than ever, announcing their departure to the world. 10 years. How could I wait that long? Though broken by the adversities of living in a country we didn't belong in, our humanity was restored at the dinner table, brimming with a colorful assortment of panchan and her signature soybean stew, still boiling from the reservoir heat of the clay pot in which it was served. A trying task, I wanted to remember her by reliving those moments, starting to learning to make my favorite dish, steamed eggs. A simple recipe to follow, yet every attempt at my ancestors rolling in their graves, I eventually resigned from my culinary ventures, relegating myself to a life of consuming instant noodles, aka ramyeon. My palate had eventually grown weary of the spice of ramen. On occasion, after cooking myself a serving, I would flush it down the toilet, expressing my prepubescent angst and protest of the circumstances. My father could not comment on the smell of ramen in the bathroom. One day he asked how I was holding up. My father was many things throughout his life, a quiet and diligent worker who took pride in his craft, the best handyman in the neighborhood, a man I revered. From a distance, and a silhouette of my father. I responded by asking if everything would be all right. He paused, put a hand on my shoulder, and forced a grin. The first time I had seen his smile since the day she left. Everything will be all right, he muttered. He patted my back, turned around, and walked away. Wiping away the tears that had begun to trail down his face. The next day, I had come home late from school. Walking up the stairs from our apartment, I was greeted by the aroma of kimchi jjigae, a symphony of clattering dishwares and utensils in the kitchen. I see my father, donned in the same pink apron that my mother used to wear, weaving awkwardly between the countertop and stove, the same rugged hands that I've seen effortlessly break a 2x4 in half, delicately arranging fried tofu slices into a circular pattern. Taken aback by the unusual spectacle, I observed in silence. Like a flower blooming in the advent of spring, did he unravel before me. He notices his youngest son standing by the doorway. He wipes the sweat off his forehead and asks, "밥 먹나?" Thank you.